be a good strategist, you've got to be a great storyteller. First of all, I think if you are not nervous at all, then I think you're not pushing yourself. If you don't do the little things properly, you're not going to do the big things properly, So first of all, you're never going to have 100% of the information you need. You're probably going to have at best 50, 60% of the information you need. So you're going to have to be able to start. You need to start. First challenge is that people want to have everything ready before they start. Big mistake. Start. A good strategy must always start from a discover phase. If you say you're going to do something, just do it.
Hello everyone, welcome to Stories and Journeys, where we explore the transformative power of learning, growth, and resilience. Join us as we uncover untold narratives and ignite curiosity. My name is Oluwatimiloye Oyedeji, and joining us here today is an OG across the continent when it comes to marketing, communication, and advertising. Someone with so much impact touching across brands, across various industries. His journey is quite unique because he has done so many amazing work, within the landscape. Someone I think you're very familiar with. He currently sits as the president for the Media Independent Practitioners of Nigeria, MIPAN. He currently sits as well as the MD CEO at PhD Media across West Africa. He's no other person than the amazing Dozie Okafor.
No pressure. All right, Dozie. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely, man.
I'm sure that we'll learn from you, and our audiences will learn so much.
Yeah, I hope so.
I want to dial back a little. All right. Looking at your journey, so when I was, preparing for this, I was thinking about it. How can someone who studied electrical engineering, many years ago, sort of be pivoted into the media space, and is doing well, doing fantastically well. When you think back, the first job, sometimes 2007, I'm going to stick here.
Yeah.
How has that journey been like for you a bit?
So first of all, I had absolutely no idea I was going to find myself in media. I read electrical engineering, like you said, in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. And immediately after that, I wasn't very clear what I would do, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. And that was, everybody wanted to work in the bank at the time. It was the new hot thing. People wanted the oil jobs, the Chevron, this. And I kind of looked at my odds of getting a job in Chevron. The odds didn't look good. I didn't think the banking thing was very interesting. But I did like engineering. So I tried getting a job in a company called Caterpillar, now called Mantrack. And I think somewhere along the first or second interview, I had scaled all the exams. I kind of realized that they were going to post me to somewhere in Port Harcourt and be attached to some generator. And I felt, that's not for me. So I ended up working in a vehicle tracking company somewhere in Ikoyi on Remo Dunjoko. And I think it was a company that was way ahead of its time. It was installing trackers. There was no Google Maps, by the way. So these maps we had to create from scratch, and we had to install trackers in vehicles, and we had to do it as a business to business. So we had to go to insurance companies. It didn't work. And I think one of those days I was flipping through a newspaper and I saw some ad saying they're looking for engineers and statisticians and things like that. They didn't say the name of the company. They just said they're looking for people good with numbers. I said, I've got a flair for numbers. That's fine. Went somewhere in Ikeja, wrote the exams, scaled through. Long story short, it ended up was a company called Media Reach OMD. So at the interview, I had to ask, what exactly do you guys do? And they said it was media strategy and planning. And I said, okay, what exactly do you guys do? I didn't get it. And, they kind of explained to say, look, they deal with numbers. They need people that understand data. They need to calculate reach numbers for audiences and so on and so forth. And basically, typical mass communication students don't really have a flair for numbers, and they just needed, people who are good at math. Okay, so I said that was fine. I loved computers as well. And, they said a few things that felt like I was going to be in the entertainment industry, meeting popular people. There's going to be a few parties. So I said, okay, fine. This is right up my alley, So I started working. And that was the beginning. That was how I got into media. And, what seemed very difficult to some people just came naturally and easy to me. I tell my staff all the time now, I said, look, you're going to be great at your job if it feels like fun to you, right? If it feels like play, what people find so difficult feels like play to you, then it's never going to feel like work and you're going to have so much fun doing it. And people are going to pay you for having fun, right? So that's why I'm getting paid for having fun.
Obviously, you're having so much fun. It's super, super obvious, But I think that, going back to what you just said, there's so much that anyone that's seen you or seen your work, would really appreciate the attention you pay to details, right? Marrying that back to, obviously, you love what you do, right? But what would you say were some of those early, levers, that you pulled, looking at your journey from electrical engineering, spending about 5 or 6 years in school at the time, and finding yourself in the media space. So those early days, what levers would you say you pull to help you stand out to the back?
You know what? I think I've always been a pretty good communicator. Well, I think I am. And it starts from probably my upbringing has a bit of credit for it because I grew up in a home where open communication was always encouraged. There was never violence in the house. It was always let's sit down and let's talk, even with parents. So we learned at a very early age to express yourself and whatever way you felt proper, but express yourself, say how you feel. And I think that transferred into the workplace as well. But there were a few incidences that happened at the workplace very early at Media Reach that kind of changed the trajectory for me. I think in my first week, I had a conversation with 2 people. One person was working in the same team with me, and he said to me, and this was the negative side of things, he said to me, oh, they don't promote people here. Doesn't matter how hard you work. I said, okay. So I put that somewhere in my mind and I said, okay, maybe did I make a wrong decision to be here? And a second person came to me one evening. We had just come back from a client meeting at GSK. That was one of the first accounts I was put on. And the guy said to me, Dozie, if you keep this up, you will go far here. And I said, now that's what I want to hear. And very early I realized that you will meet all kinds of characters. You will be given all forms of advice, but you've got to be very careful what you stick with and what you use to build your career from. And I chose to take the advice about keeping up what I'm doing. And then very early in my career, I built a culture of learning something every day. It sounds simplistic, and I tell my people this, that it's kind of what I've done. I've done that for the last 20 years. I learn one new thing every day. And I tell them, it doesn't matter what it is. Just learn, just get a culture of learning as part of your life. So I learned how to type very early when I was young. I never knew computers will have the same keyboards as typewriters, right? And then computers become a thing. And then I'm typing at 60 words per minute and people are wondering how. And I'm like, well, I actually learned in the typewriter. And I used it to make money in school, by the way, because I was typing 10 papers for people a night, and I was making money off it. I learned to enjoy writing things down. And people underestimate the importance of documentation, right? And it doesn't matter what it is, even if it's just journaling, even if it's just a to-do list, but writing things down surprisingly makes you very on point in meetings, right? And it gives you a record of every conversation, and you're able to kind of think things through better. At least that's how it works for me. I'm able to really visualize and remember things when I write them down. And Nigerians surprisingly have a very bad documentation culture, right? And also a bad reading culture as well, but maybe we'll come to that later on. And I think those were kind of the early things. But I think most importantly, I was doing a lot of things that I loved doing. I mean, put me in front of a computer, give me numbers to analyze. I really did enjoy it. And the perks of it was I could also blend that with communication, standing in front of clients, having a conversation, convincing them on why the strategy works. But I've got to give it to companies like Media Reach OMD that at a very young age made us feel like we were in control of things. So there was something Media Reach used to do there. I don't know if they do it anymore. But they would never put your designation or your title on your complimentary card. They would just say Dozie Okafor strategy. It helped to position even younger people as much more. So when they would put me in front of a client like Stanbic IBTC, when they were working on their merger and I was driving strategy for Stanbic, they didn't know I was a very junior executive. They just felt it was, one of their lead strategists, but I wasn't. I was a very junior person at the time. But it helped. They helped to build confidence in young people. Yeah.
Insightful. I kind of very insightful because going back to the story you shared around, how you started out, you found your fit in strategy.
Yep.
And here you are, leading strategy for a multi-billion, naira, business at the time. How did you come about strategy? Like, how did you try to find strategy? Did it find you? If you could please, for the purpose of, a 22-year-old, watching this and they feel like they have flair for that, so I want to come into strategy. Jotting the lines back to the fact that you were head, strategy, at Media Reach at the time.
Yeah. Look, I think it was probably a bit of both. Strategy found me, but I also kind of gravitated towards it. In simple terms, to be a good strategist, you've got to be a great storyteller. You've got to enjoy talking. Let's start from there, right? If you are the quiet type, few words, it's probably not for you. But you've got to enjoy talking, and you've got to be a good storyteller, and you've got to be able to start from point A to point B, but let there be a clear line that connects all that. And when I say storytelling, I mean you've got to be able to tell the client, here's the problem, here's the friction, here's the insight that I have as to why we're having this problem, and this is how I believe we can solve it, my big idea. And this is how I intend to bring that big idea through different touch points. Oh, and by the way, here's what's going to cost to do that. And if you invest this amount, this is what is going to deliver. Yes, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that really is the story, right? And when you're able to really craft the right story, and first of all, to be able to craft the right story, you've got to do a lot of research on the client itself, right? So my people in the office get frustrated when we're going for a pitch and I bring up tens of pages of literature on the client that we need to read, about their company, about when they got listed, their last investor call, open up their P&L and read, go on LinkedIn, read. They're like, look, just call for a chat. What's all this read? I'm like, no, we've got to be prepared. You've got to understand the client, and sometimes my people get amazed when we walk into the room and I'm conversing with the clients on a very intellectual level about their brands, about what they're doing all over the continent. And the client is impressed that we have so much knowledge about them in a first meeting. And I think that's kind of the pitch before the pitch, where, you are giving the client a taste of what it will feel like to work with you in the future. And I think we've got pretty good at it at PhD. Yeah.
Nice. So how have you been able to sort of, sometimes you find that younger people, right, maybe because of attention span, they tend not to do certain things the way OGs like you, prefer to do it. How have you been able to pass that, knowledge, that discipline down the line, for a small startup, watching this, and, they have that, they position themselves to be a business that can help brands with strategy, but they're struggling with getting it down to the foot soldiers. How were you able to, or how have you been able to pass it down the line?
Look, first of all, I think leaders like myself and even older need to learn how to be very patient and also learn to be empathic. I learned empathy the hard way. I happen to have 2 kids that have special needs, and you will learn to be extremely patient with everything. you will learn to put things on hold and deal with things when they need to be dealt with. So, based on my own personal life experience, I kind of run my business the same way. I'm able to pause and just allow people be who they are, and then gradually get them. My people say in the office, I give people too much rope, but it comes from a place of empathy. It comes from a place of saying, you know what is the end goal? I want this guy to be an outstanding strategist. I see the potential in him. But right now he's impatient. He wants to dye his hair red, let him. He wants to party and drink. Well, that's the age. He wants to do X and Y. This is not the time to shout and try to beat sense into the person, because all he's going to do is up and leave, right? You can't force him to be there. You've got to find ways to talk to people. You've got to find ways to, sometimes I spend the entire day just having conversations with my staff. I don't have a PA for good reason, because I tell my people, I want you to be able to walk into my office and let's have a chat. Agency business is still a very personal type of thing. We might be big, but in the eye of the client, an agency is a small part. It's part of my extended brand team, and that's the way it needs to look. To my clients, I'm just the lead strategist. I'm not CEO, right? So when we come to make a pitch, it's just Dozie and his team. That's what it is, and it's fine. But back to young people, I think first of all, you have to have empathy. You have to understand that they don't have the same training and upbringing we had. They see life very differently. They are not as desperate as many of us were. When I tell, Gen Zs that, during our time after NYC, we took our CVs and we're roaming the streets of Lagos, and that's your job for the day, going door to door. They can't understand how anybody would spend weeks doing that. But that's what we did. We, for lack of a better word, we're a bit desperate. But they've seen that, there are other ways to live life, So if you don't understand that, you're going to keep making terrible statements like, back in my day and, when I was this, we used to work on Saturdays and we used to work on Sundays, and it doesn't make it right because you did that. You get what I mean? So I found a way to allow people be themselves. I've also found a way to teach media and strategy and break it down so simply that it makes sense to anyone, right? I tell my staff that if you can't explain any topic in simple terms, then you don't know it well enough. You get what I mean? Eh? Kind of like lecturers we used to have in school. They struggle to break things down. It's not their fault. They didn't have enough grasp of the topic. If you know the topic, you can explain it to a dummy in very simple terms, and that's probably my approach. And maybe because I like talking, so I do classes in the office. I take them through lectures. I enjoy design thinking. I enjoy building systems, and I enjoy explaining how it's built, not just handing it over to you. So even till today, if I build dashboards on like Power BI, I walk my entire team how it was built, and show them the back end so that they get it. They get the entire gist. So you don't just see the output, you understand all that's went into it, and allow people to ask questions. It's not easy, but it works. It works.
Yeah, interesting. Looking at what you said now and while you were speaking, I was just thinking about it. There's so much that has to do with art and science in this line of business, and you're super expert at it with strategy. So what would you say I know you might not have like a template or a checklist, but what would you say are essential pillars, for a strategy that would ensure that it's, the bullseye and make consumers pick?
Yeah. Look, I think I would put it this way, and it's the same way I teach my people in the office. A good strategy must always start from a discover phase. And that discover phase is essentially you looking through the brief, looking through some level of exploration, research work, and honestly, ChatGPT has made it so easy now, right? It used to be a lot harder back in the day. Looking through insights, running whatever type of research you can do, that stage. Then after the discover stage, there has to be some kind of I'm looking for the device stage. The device stage is where you define your target audience. Be it in terms of age, be it in terms of behavior, so both demographics and psychographics. Is it male? Is it female? Is it this gender? Do they like alcohol? Do they, all that definition? And then you start to kind of define how many of them live in a certain location. If I was to market to them in Lagos, how many of them could I get? What kind of penetration can I achieve? What do they watch? What do they listen to? Where can I find them if I need to use outdoor? What kind of events do they, all that goes into that device stage. And then we go into some kind of design phase. The design phase is where you start to think about your big idea. But before you get into that, you have to take whatever brand you're trying to work on and understand what kind of distinctive assets that brand has that you can leverage. Okay. So if it's, if it's a chocolate beverage, for instance, is there something about the packaging? Is there something about the taste? Is there something about the additives? Is there something you can leverage in the communication? Then you have to see how that connects to the need states of the consumer. So are those distinctive assets something that it resonates with that consumer from a need state span point of view? So maybe you've put something in the product that delivers energy, and energy boost is a need state, or there's just something about the brand personality. It's very youthful and it loves to party, and that's kind of whatever you can leverage. So both functional and emotional benefits come to play. And then you find ways to connect that. And then ultimately you want to bring out a big idea that brings those two things together. Usually we would brainstorm, we would do some SWOTs, we would try to figure out what the connection between the need states and the distinctive assets are, and we would distill that into a core idea. And then based on that core idea, we're able to look for an innovative way to leverage and get the communication out there. Once we define that idea or that proposition, we now look for media platforms that we can bring that proposition to life through. So there are different touch points you can explore, there are different category entry points. It could be through music, it could be through news, it could be through on-ground events, it could be, whatever, it could be through digital. And then you have to break down how you intend to bring it out to life in digital. What type of platforms are you going to use? What kind of lens? Are you going to use influencers, and what are they going to say? Are you going to use reels, and why, and all that? And then you move into the determine stage, which is where you break down the cost elements for each of these things and what it will deliver. Deliver in terms of audience size, deliver in terms of potential conversions. And by conversions, I mean there is definitely a purchase funnel where the biggest part of the funnel is everyone you're trying to reach, and the bottom is kind of the people that eventually convert and buy the product. So we also have to do that whole purchase funnel exercise. But just for clarity, there are activities that are geared towards the top of the funnel, and there are activities that are geared towards the bottom of the funnel that drive immediate conversions. And then we show that's really where the number crunching comes in. So you've got to run all the data, show all the numbers, show the reach, show the frequency, show the flighting of the campaign. And after that, you put a cost to it. Now, you could just put a simple sheet of paper in front of a client and say, here's your strategy. But that doesn't seem to work a lot. So you've got to have a very good and convincing story. And that's where people like myself come in, because we have strong visuals, we shoot videos, we do case studies. You've got to make an event out of it to convince somebody to spend, say, $1 billion on advertising. You better have a good story to tell, and you have to be able to convince people, because nobody's going to just give you money to go, put some communication out there. And you've got to support that at the end of the day with some research. So some of the things that we're doing right now at PhD is that we've got our own bespoke research layered on what we do from the global office, where we're able to sense check everything we're investing and go back to the client with close to real-time data on what we're doing out there. So if we, for instance, ask the client to sponsor the English Premier League, for instance, and they're putting billions of naira behind it, we have to be able to say, here's how many people we've reached through it, and we've got to connect that data and attribute it to the kind of uptake they're seeing on maybe their devices, on maybe, things like that. So there has to be a clear line through what we're doing and what they're seeing. And we have to be ready to adjust as we go along to make sure we meet the objectives.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, this is where you walk into rooms, and you were scared, for a pitch, for example.
So first of all, I think if you are not nervous at all, then I think you're not pushing yourself. If you are constantly comfortable walking into every room, 100% confident, then maybe you need a bigger challenge. That's the way I see it. So I tend not to like if I'm not a bit nervous. I enjoy being nervous because I feel, now this is something that is challenging me. And I encourage my people that work, with me at PhD to embrace it, right? That is excitement, that's that feeling you have. It's excitement. So I do feel nervous even till today. I've got a lot of experience presenting and pitching, and luckily I started very early doing it. So I enjoy it. So I think it's still very exciting. I still feel nervous from time to time. I still have pitches almost all the time. And wake up early, rehearse, make sure you have the right clothes, clean your shoes. Usually once you just start, and it starts to flow, and everything seems okay. But what I've learned is that the harder I prepare, the less nervous I am during the actual pitch process. And I think what makes me nervous is really that the stakes are usually so high. And because the agency business can be brutal, right? I've seen agencies lose an account and the agencies get shut down just on the back of the account. And that's why I've modeled my agency very differently from typical agency businesses. Because I never want to be in a position where I have to look staff in the face and tell them to go, especially when they've done nothing wrong. But in our industry, it is commonplace. And luckily, in the last 10 years, I've not had to do that to anyone on the back of losing an account.
Obviously, there's so much that goes into that, right?
No,
The business standpoint.
absolutely.
Yeah, I know we're talking about creativity, talking about marketing, but I know you also wear that business hat.
Absolutely.
And looking at where you sit now as president of MIPAN, I want to just dial your man back to 15 years ago, right? So what are the evolution that you see within the marketing space or the landscape in Nigeria? And as a president of MIPAN, what recommendations do you have, either to agencies or practitioners within the industry, just to ensure that the bar keeps getting a notch higher?
I think the classic agency client model is changing, and there's a lot of evolution happening. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, your typical agency model, or let's even go further than that, let's say 20 years ago, it was full service agencies, right? And maybe a little bit older than that, where it was usually the creative agency in front and media agency at the back, and every other person follows suit, right? And then media became so specialist that it spun out and became its own thing. And then you got media independent agencies like ours. And even that model is beginning to shift, because what made media agencies stand out then was, okay, they were good with the numbers, they had research data, but now you've got research companies also encroaching into that space. So you've got, the people who used to audit our business for clients are saying, hey, we've audited this thing so much, we know where all the issues lie, and we can do a better job than a lot of the agencies. And they're actually taking agency businesses in some territories. And the model of you wait for a brief or you wait for a pitch, and when you get invited, you pitch, winner takes all. And then you handle that account for 3 years, 4 years, and then they pitch again. If you're lucky, you win it again, and probably that will be the last time you would handle it. So maybe you've got 6 years, 7 years to handle any one account, and then you move on to another one. That worked well for probably a decade or two. But I think there is a lot of shifts now where there are a lot of things that the agencies used to do for clients that the clients can now do for themselves. They are, take creative work, for instance, that they can now, handle. They can insource some of those things. So agencies like ours are beginning to think about how we shift our model. A good example would be data as a service, right? So we've got data platforms that we're selling to clients and even non-clients. And I don't need to come pitch your entire account. It's an offering. I can provide you this data. I can support research behind your sponsorships. I can support research. And you can keep your own agency, right? I'm just providing you this data as a service, and I can give you a dashboard and you can access it. And if you don't want to do that, we can do all the work for you and we'll take a fee. So that's one example. We also provide other services. We run trainings, we run research work, we run qualitative studies, and things like that. Some clients see a lot of value in that as well, and that we handle. And then we're also shifting into a return on experience where we don't just do TV spots, radio spot, but we take the brief and we look at the entire experience. So an example would be the most recent one I think we've done is something we did for Mattel, which was called the Mattel Tower. And we built a 5-story structure, which originally started as an outdoor idea, billboard idea. But we kind of evolved that into an entire experience. And their whole Dirty December campaign was built around something that was supposedly to be a billboard, right? But we tied in not just outdoor ambient media, we tied in events, we tied in influencer, and it became an entire experience and pulled in all the different disciplines. So PR, creative, everybody working on that project. And it became a pivotal part of the entire activities for Mattel for the entire year. Now, to think that all that was born out of a media execution, many years ago, that wouldn't be possible, right? So those are the kind of things we're thinking about. Another example would be with flour mills. So we've got something we call Soup Fest. And it was, to be honest, it was kind of a borrowed idea from what we're doing with Unilever at the time with Knorr. So we went to GoldiePenny and said, look, we do this with Unilever, and we think with your Semovita and this, you could do a soup fest. Soups are probably the widest variety of food we have in Africa, and we started taking it state to state, and that typically wouldn't be a media man's idea. They would typically just stay in their TV, radio, digital. But we're looking at the entire experience. That gives us TV content, that gives us digital content, it gives us engagement online, so that entire experience delivers more for the client than our typical models. So we're beginning to see that we also have to evolve, and when we do those kind of experiences, we become an integral part of the client's business. It makes the relationship very sticky, right? Because we're on ground, we're helping, we're delivering, and we're also researching and giving reports on what we're doing, and clients seem to like it, or seems to deliver awesome stuff. And AI can't take that job.
Nice. Which is very true, actually. Very, very true. I'm happy to even hear about this thing, right? But you touched on a tool, right? So for anyone watching now, that's interested in that data as a service offering, how do they reach out?
Oh, okay, absolutely. So I think a couple of years ago, we developed something we called Ocular. And Ocular is the simplest way to put it is an online panel. So we've got about 6,000 respondents in Nigeria across about 16 states. And what it essentially helps the client to do is ask any question at any time about anything, and can get the results in 48 hours, right? And it's done through mobile surveys. So, I mean, some even as low as USSD, African solution for African problems, so everyone has a phone. Even if you don't have a smartphone, you can get USSD, and so you get feature phones, and that's kind of the way we collate it. But it's all embedded into a very intuitive dashboard that is also on mobile that the clients can. But now we've put in some AI integration so that it walks the client through the questionnaire process, helps the client formulate questions. The client can ask his question, and the AI agent will give him the list of questions, likely questions, how to frame it, and so on and so forth. So we just released the 2.0, so it's still in this beta stage. But in a couple of weeks we would be done with that, fully functional. And then we're rolling out in Ghana, in Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire from Q4 into next year.
Oh, nice. Yes, nice. Well done, because that's one innovation there. Because obviously the data is a big problem.
It is.
We made this time. The thing that your business taking initiative, to lead the frontier, on that front is super really. So well done to you and your team.
Yeah,
on that front. Looking at your journey as well, and I assume you should expect this question, but I'm just going to go straight to it. Your journey, you had left an agent and gone to the client side, right? Not just any client, was Coca-Cola at the time, went almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Now went back to the agency. It's not typical, for an agency man. You find that most persons who want to lead the agency and just go to the client side, But for you, at that time, what made you make that choice?
So I had worked with the agency across Nigeria and Ghana for a couple of years. And I got to a point where I said, you know what, I want to understand the full marketing mix. Media is one part of the marketing story. I wanted to see the entire thing and understand how this works from end to end. Because I felt that would make me a better strategist, right? Because the problem we used to have as young strategists working into a client's office, they felt we didn't understand their business. We just understood media. So a media guy would go into a boardroom and just be talking about, all kinds of outlandish media executions. And this is a client who makes 5 naira margin on every product he sells. So the guy's like, you don't get it. Another example could be somebody trying to, pitch a luxury alcohol client and is just totally off in terms of positioning the brand, and doesn't really understand the story, the heritage of the brand, and how they want to be positioned. I remember as a very young strategist, I was pitching something to Hennessy, and I had done this strategy around embedding Hennessy into music videos and the hip hop culture, and how we could be in all the top 10 music videos. And we had spoken to some music video directors, some of the very top in the game. We had shortlisted some artists that we're going to shoot in the next quarter. And we put a very lovely deck together. And we went, the French guys came into the room and we were presenting. And when we were done, they said, we will not pay for any product placements. We get thousands of free product placements from artists from all over the world every day. What that told me is that please do your homework before coming in front of any clients. And it helped me to understand how brands see themselves. And then when you craft your strategy, have that understanding. And I think that was also a shift for me. And I'm happy that happened very, very early in my career as a very young strategist. And it kind of helped me make sure that I do my homework properly, understand the brand, what it represents, their do's and don'ts, and make sure it's well embedded within the strategy. I've gone on a tangent now.
So I think you're on track, and the question was more around why did you leave agency?
There you go.
Brand side.
So look, I wanted to understand the full marketing mix. So I said to myself, it has to be a top 5 marketing company. I went about looking for opportunities. I got an opportunity with a telco I won't name. And I think I got the job. After my chat with the managing director, it was awesome. Top floor, office overlooking the sea. When I was walking out of the office, I knew I didn't want the job because I just felt like I would disappear in this place. It was just hundreds of people. It just wasn't me. I want to make an impact, and I want my impact to be seen and felt. I didn't want to be one of the many. I wanted to work in an environment where decisions I make and the work I do actually makes a difference. If you get what I mean. So that company wasn't going to work for me. So I got home the same day and I told them I'm not going to take it. And, obviously they didn't like what they heard. And, the head of the marketing team then, he said something that I will never forget. He said, we're trying to change your life, And then I said, now I know I made the right decision not to take this job. So shortly after that, I got a call from Coca-Cola. And I said, yeah, this is more like it. And I walked into the office in Ikoyi, lovely little place, not more than 100 people on the shop floor. I said, this is where I want to be. And Coke had a thing of having, one key person in every discipline. So there was one media manager, there was one brand manager, there was, so everybody earned their position and deserved their position. And everybody's impact was felt. Because as the media manager, then, if you don't do your job, it will show. But on the flip side, if you do it, it's outstanding. So I felt that was the place for me. So I took the job. I didn't think much about it. I think I even accepted it before I even knew the details of the salary. But luckily the salary was good. So that's how I got into Coke. The plan was always to come back to agency. Always.
Why?
But the plan was to start my own agency. Because I felt that was more along what I wanted to do. People don't like it when I say this, but I found the client side very easy because the agencies do most of the work. And I wasn't used to being bored, right? Agency life is, in the morning you're doing alcohol, in the afternoon you're doing food seasoning, in the evening you're working on detergent, the next day you're selling condoms, the next minute you're doing everything. And I learned to enjoy reading a lot. But suddenly I'm only selling Coke, right? And there's only so much reading to do about that one product. But then again, I also have an army of agencies, and very good agencies, by the way. There was an agency called Media Perspective that was my agency at the time, and they had brilliant people, both digital and traditional media. So they did a pretty decent job, So most of the time, there wasn't a lot to be done, And so I started volunteering for things. I was helping marketing team handle their audits. I was kind of doing other stuff. And then roughly just under 2 years, my guys from Omnicom, called me back to say, look, they first said there was an opportunity in Ghana. And I said, nah, I've been to Ghana, I'm not going back there. And then they said, okay, so what would work? And I said, well, I could come back to PhD, but I would want to run the business. Okay, they thought about it, and then I said, that's not where it ends. I would also want a stake in the business. Now, that was a difficult one. And I knew it was a difficult one, but I was also negotiating from a place of strength because I wasn't exactly looking for the job. So it took about 6 months for them to kind of figure out how that would work, because that was not on the cards, if you get my meaning. So they put together something, they drafted an equity management plan, we reached an agreement. I was here, they were here, we found our way somewhere in the middle. and with a plan on how I could progress to where I want to be, be it through buying shares, be it through this, so we came up with something that worked. And then I came back and the strategy was simple. I said, we're going to bring in, and it's what I had done with them from the beginning. I said, every year I'm going to bring in X number of clients. We're going to grow the business by this. I had basically recruited half of the people that had worked at PhD at the time. So they were my old team. So we worked very well together, and they understood my work ethic. They know I can be quite intense when it comes to getting things done, and they were more than happy. I'm going to be honest, I'm blessed with fantastic people at PhD. They accommodate a lot of my excesses because I can be very detailed and finicky about things, things that others would kind of overlook, but I tell them, no, even the little things, if you don't do the little things properly, you're not going to do the big things properly, and they stuck with me, 10 years ago, I couldn't pay them what I pay them now, but, now we can,
So yeah, that's really beautiful. You see, the thing is, I truly admire the courage, right? Because it was,
yeah. My wife didn't like it though,
because
I took a pay cut.
right.
Yeah, so she didn't like it. And
How about now?
now she's happy now. And to be honest, she won't like it if I say this, but for the first couple of years, I never told her how much I earned because I knew she was going to be mad that I took such a massive pay cut. But I explained to her that, look, I've got a deal. It's a good deal. I can grow this business and then make what I want to make. It doesn't look good now, but give me 3 years. But I knew that if I just showed her the pay slip, she's going to be like, what? How would you leave Coke for this? So I kept that to myself and just made sure that, what I was giving them at home remained the same, right? While I was left with nothing, that kind of thing. But, gradually, things picked up. Look, when I took over PhD was, I don't know, total annual billing was what, 2 billion? Last year we were at 30 billion, so it's we've grown the business. And my people surprisingly have stayed, in all the madness. I've got people that have been with me with 14 years. And in agency years, that's a while. That's a while. I've got, my second line of directors, they've been with me 8-9 years, So yeah, it's been quite a journey. So everybody had to be a bit sacrifice something, I had to sacrifice something. Early days were rough, we could barely connect the dots at all, but now, it's paying off.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's very instructive, right? Based on learning from your own experience, right? And for people watching this, right? There are times when creative people or strategists, let me say sometimes you find that creative people or strategists, they'll struggle with business, right? But you sort of owned it, you saw it, you brought it to life, right? And I want to credit that to mindset. What was your mindset like, and how were you able to, manage stakeholders like wife, family, everyone, and just be laser focused on that goal, that belief that in 3 years, I'm going to do this. What was the mindset like, and how were you able to get yourself to that place, driving that growth, for the business, just in case there's someone that has a fantastic idea out there, creative or a strategist, but they're not just so clear on how to go about it, because in real life, it can be very foggy. In short, yeah. So how did you go about it, so that we can also help someone out there as well?
So first of all, you're never going to have 100% of the information you need. You're probably going to have at best 50, 60% of the information you need, but you're going to have to be able to start. You need to start. First challenge is that people want to have everything ready before they start. Big mistake. Start. Get some information, get as much as you need to be able to make an informed decision and start. Another thing is, I've always had a culture, like I said earlier, I have a culture of writing things down. And there's something I've done, even outside business, I usually do with my wife, is like every end of the year we take stock and we say, what did we plan to do this year and what have we achieved? And then what is our plan for next year? We write it down. And whether it's getting a house or whether it's getting something for the kids or whatever it is, we write it down. Now, the work I need to do is take that thing and break it down into Naira and Kobo, split it by months, and see what needs to come in every month or what needs to stop every month to enable us to achieve that, so that at the end of 12 months, we would have arrived at that. Now, that's my work. That's not my wife's work. Her work ends in brainstorming with me on the idea. I've got to go figure out the rest. And you can apply that to business. So one of the things I did, which was unconventional at the time, but now I think is commonplace, is that I employed a business development manager. Agencies don't usually have that nomenclature, and there's a reason why. We're just strategists, planners, buyers, compliance. That's what it is. So I brought in this guy, and I said to him, look, you've got a background. He had worked in the finishing school. He had worked in supply chain at Enzo. He had worked in a few places. And I said, this is the idea I have. I want to bring in 3 to 4 clients every year. And I want to be able to double my billings every 2 or 3 years annually. I need you to do an entire business plan around who are the big clients, what are the industries they're in, how much are they spending, and give me a short list of all the clients that can help us get there. When we have that short list, we now craft a strategy to get each of them. And we have like a 1-year lead time on everyone. And we say, okay, are we going to go through the training route? Are we going to go through this? Are we going to go through that? And it's applying strategic thinking even in the way we source the clients. So that's one of the things we did. And look, I'm going to be honest. One of the ways we also keep our shareholders happy is that I've got a simple principle of profit first. So if I've committed to the board that we're going to achieve X numbers, I set that aside first. It's what is left we'll spend. Whatever happens, I'm going to make my numbers. It's as simple as that. Again, it looks simplistic, but it works, right? My staff probably didn't like it because early days, we had to squeeze ourselves a lot. We just couldn't do things, Typically, agencies will celebrate wins and, we didn't do any of that. Agencies will go for, conferences all over. We never did any of that. But there was a plan. We needed to grow the business to a certain point. I also said to my people, I don't want any one business to be more than 25% of our portfolio. They didn't fully understand it, but I said to them, look, if that client leaves, people will have to leave, right? And you've got to be able to spread these things. But I think most importantly is just getting the right people and being able to explain your vision to them, not in corporate speak, just break it down. What works for the Nigerian is, if we do this, this is what will happen to us. Just break it down that way. And to achieve this, these are the 10 things you must do. If you can, break it down to what we will do on Monday, what we will do on Tuesday, what we will do on Wednesday, and we will do it together. And that's the way I've chosen to work with my people. It's a very hands-on way, but I've noticed that Nigerians resonate very well with it because they feel like, Oga is in it with us. He's in the trenches with us, going through these motions with us. And even though he isn't paying us as much as that other agency that wanted to poach us, he makes us feel like we belong to something. And last but not the least, keep your promises, man. If you say you're going to do something, just do it. I've got into trouble many times with my board by just keeping my promise to my people, because I said to them, look, I told them I would do it, I'm going to do it. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it. Because these are the people that drive the business. Sure. I'm not going into details of what we do, but companies have to be there for people when no one else can. And there's always the fear, oh, you could do all this for this person and he will leave. And I'm like, so what? We didn't do it as a trap. So I think it's a very wrong way to think about supporting staff. Some companies would send staff on training and get them to sign some. I don't give you anything to sign, man. If you go for the training and you still feel you need to leave a week after the training, that's fine. It was never a trap. I'm investing in you to improve my business. So there's a bit of selfishness there too. So let's be honest. It wasn't just a gift, right? So it's kind of the way I look at it. And I also look at, even when staff leave, I say to my people, if people don't leave sometimes, you can't get in brighter hands. So you've got to look at it from that standpoint. And I said, if people also don't leave, you don't have ambassadors that go out and talk about how great PhD is. That's the only way you get people from PhD working. That's how Coke got people from Coke going out there and saying such great things about Coke and wanting other people to come work at Coke. And I said, that's just the way the world works. And by the way, we also just put some people from somewhere else. So it's all fair, isn't it? So it's kind of the way I see things. Yeah.
Makes sense. Quite apt. If you've listened to this, I'm sure that you're taking notes. These are things that can help you, either grow your career, grow your business, and it can show you for greatness. Looking at what he has said, learn from the experience. There's so much more that you can achieve. Don't just think about now. Be more strategic in your thinking. Be more big picture thinking, focused, and then you'll see that you achieve your goals. I want to dial back a little.
All right.
What was growing up like for you as a person? And what lessons would you say you learned from growing up that has sort of helped your ethics, your principles, and even drive, to this world?
So I was born in Lagos. I was born in Antoni Village. That's where I grew up. And then very early we moved to Ogudu. And then there was nothing in Ogudu at that time. It was just maybe 5-6 military men that because for some reason there were a lot of military people in Ogudu at the time. And it was just empty land all over the place. So that's where I grew up. My father had a thing for making sure we do everything ourselves. So even down to painting the house, he would buy buckets of paint. He would give all the boys brushes and say, you face that wall, you that wall, and that. And he would teach you how to do it and then tell you, carry on. So we learned hand skills, right? We learned a lot of skills. So he would never get laborers to do things. If we need to cut down a tree, he would go out and buy a chainsaw and then get us to do it. There were 3 boys and he's like, you can do it, So I think very early in life, we learned the principle of learn to do things yourself, right? And I think it has just stayed with me all my life. My dad used to work in insurance and he was always good with money, right? Well, not good with spending it, but good, good in managing it. And I think from him, I learned the principle of always writing things down, because there was nothing you could ask him for. He literally got me an exercise book and says, you would write, so you go put the date, you write all the things you want and put the prices next to it. And then when you come to him, you would explain why you need all those things. And maybe out of those 10 things, you actually just need 5. The rest are just, wants. So it taught me very early to separate your needs from your wants. And then it was a pain, but now I understand why it's done and I apply it in business. He also helped me understand finance very early. He used to be a huge investor in stocks and shares. I couldn't understand it. But he would get me to sit in front of long spreadsheets and call out the share prices, because he needed to update, because we used to update it manually. There were no computers. So the newspapers used to print the share prices of all the companies on the stock exchange. And then he would need to adjust so that he can see his own net worth and whatever it is. So I used to help him do that. So it started as something very boring, but I got to understand the stock market very early. And then learn to read profit and loss statements also very early, right? I didn't really know what it meant. I was just helping my dad, but I got to understand what it meant very early. But that also helped. I never knew I was going to run a business, and now it's easy for me to read my books and understand it. But he also taught me contentment, and I think that was the most important thing. The man had this notion of it's not about getting more; it's about reducing what you need. So he's like, you've got to look at wealth from a different standpoint. It's not about, you can either keep making more or make what you're making and want less things so that you don't have to spend so much. And I think he was more of, I rather want less things. So he's not going to go out and buy a 7-bedroom house. He's going to get a 3-bedroom house. He's not going to go buy the flashiest car. He's going to get a car that just runs. He was that kind of person. And he always lived below his means. Always. I never saw him do anything extravagant. Once. Nothing. He would buy brand new cars, but you would see that was not the best car in the shop. Right? That was just him. We found it a bit crazy back then, but now I get it, I get it. I understand what he was trying to do and what he was trying to teach us. And he would say something, when we do all our prayers, he would say, look, never compare yourself with people, just compare yourself now with yourself last year. Say, do that, right? That gives you a sense of growth. But don't compare yourself with people. Just run your race. And it's kind of been my own guiding principle. And it's something very early when I got married, I told my wife the same thing. I said, look, it's us, right? So we're going to compare ourselves with ourselves. And, we will sit at the end of every year and look at where we were last year. And if we've improved, we've done amazing. That's all. That's all you need to know. And then let's plan what the next year is going to be. And that's it. That's it. Interesting.
That's just some more questions for legible. Yeah. This is just organic, and I'm going to ask, I hope you're going to answer. Did getting married, change you? Let me rephrase. At the face in life, a man who decides to settle down.
Yeah.
Right. At that point of you making that decision of settling down, right? And if you think about it now, do you think that settling down when you settle down, or just getting married, do you think he brought out more potentials in you? Do you think it brought about any change? Do you think there was any impact from it? That has sort of propelled you in towards certain positive or whatever direction.
Yeah. Look, I think, if anything at all, getting married got me a lot more focused. Before I got married, I was, every assignment I was happy to take, come go to Ghana, spend a year, why not? Come go here, do this, why not? I was everywhere. But I think getting married helped me get a lot more grounded. And I got married to someone who had so much mental maturity that she was able to sit me down and really have a conversation about the future. And very early, even before we got married, she always wanted to have that conversation about, okay, so what's your plan? She would always ask that, what's your plan? What do you want to do? And it forces you to go think, right? It forces you to go think. And she's also a pretty good manager of funds. So she was one who you could, commit something to, and she would follow it through and stick to the plan. She was that kind of person, and probably even execute the plan better. So she helped me stay focused. Some people say, oh, don't discuss your business with your wife. Well, don't do that, but you also need guidance sometimes, and whether you like it or not, when the meetings are over and, the friends have gone home, it's going to be you and madam in the house, and the kids are going to leave someday as well. It's just going to be you and her, and you had better have your best friend in the house with you because that's the eventuality, right? So you're going to have to be able to have that conversation. So yes, it did get me a lot more focused. It did get me more grounded. And I was lucky enough to marry someone who was patient and was happy to plan and go the long route to success, as against, let's make some quick money, And I think that anything that will endure, it takes time, it takes time.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dozie, for sharing with us. Probably the final question. What's your vision for Africa? And what role do you see, marketing and communications playing in that vision?
Look, I think Africa is the next frontier. I happen to spend a lot of time outside Nigeria, and the UK, parts of Europe, and so on. And I see the shifts, right? I mean, and anybody who just looks at the numbers, just look at the growth rates, economic growth rates in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and then look at the UK, right? The story is there. People just, and that's another thing. Nigerians are just not good at looking at data and inferring from it. We dump data, but we don't understand the reason, what those numbers really mean. Africa is definitely on the rise. We see that happening with the kind of inflow of foreign direct investments and the kind of conversations we're beginning to have. And it's not just products and brands now, it's even schools coming into our market. I mean, so we're seeing it happen not just in the food and drink industry. Now it's even in education, it's in service. Because where else are you going to get double-digit growth in your business? You can't get it in the West anymore. So I've always been an advocate for Africa. I used to tell my people in the office that if I ever found my way into government, people must wear traditional attire to work at least once or twice a day. We don't understand how that can. Maybe you ask the question again, I guess.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So, what's your vision for Africa, and what role do you see marketing playing in that vision?
So I think Africa is the next frontier. I think Africa is definitely showing a lot of growth. If you just look at the numbers, the economic growth, GDP growth for African countries are way ahead of a lot of countries in the West. Take the UK for instance. That seems to be stagnating and very little growth happening. I think marketers and marketing organizations and agencies in Nigeria and the rest of Africa need to understand that they have to start developing African solutions for African progress. So enough of this copy-paste. You understand your market, create a solution for your market and sell it out there. Nigeria is a very interesting case. I tell people, just look at YouTube. Look at how we've taken our home video culture to YouTube. No other country is doing that. But that is our culture. You can bring your product. We will teach you how to use it. Take food, take noodles, for instance. Look at how we've converted it. There's jollof noodles, there's what. It's just the way the Africans are. Look at mobile money, It's English, but many European countries don't understand what you mean by mobile money because it's an African solution, right? And that can happen in almost every industry. And I think there isn't enough of people, first of all, pausing, looking at the society, understanding what our needs are, and then developing a solution based on that insight. As against saying, and this is what happens a lot of the time, here's how we did it in the UK, here's how we did it in Brazil, here's how we did it in Dubai, therefore, that's how we're going to do it in Africa. And we've seen many businesses fail on the back of that. So we've got to flip that and say, look, what are the challenges we have and what are the solutions that we can bring forward? And I think in our own little way, we're trying to do that. But in terms of growth, I'm 100% betting on Africa and Nigeria, to be more precise. And it's not just about what we're doing in music and look, even in music industry, it's just a very small group of very big stars that are really making money in the music industry. The rest aren't there yet. But it's just looking at the data. What I see the data show, be in terms of our growth, be in terms of industries. I mean, walk around Lagos, there are cranes everywhere. I said to somebody, that's one of the easiest way to know growth, societal growth. I don't see a lot of cranes walking around when I'm in the UK. I'm not talking about London. London is in the UK, the rest of the UK. I don't see a lot of cranes. There isn't construction going on. I see it in Dubai. I see it in other countries, but not so much in a lot of European countries. That's an example of growth, at least infrastructure, right? Because everybody needs it. Whether you're a fully developed market or not, you do need infrastructure. So yeah, I mean, Africa is on the rise, and even from my company, and I'm part of the Omnicom group, we're actually trying to put together a regional conference for the first time, ourselves, West and Central Africa, all meeting in one place and really trying to consolidate this thing. I don't think enough of that is happening. I think there are more Nigerians that know more about London than they know about Togo. And I'm trying to change that narrative within my office. We're looking at ways we can exchange staff. I've got a staff who sits in Benin and Gabon for a couple of weeks every quarter. So we're trying to get that integration going, because we've got to understand our backyard. Many of us don't. We don't know what happens in Cote d'Ivoire, and you can go there visa free. And here we are queuing at the US Embassy,
Man, I say thank you, thank you so much. It's been very, very insightful, chatting now.
Absolute pleasure.
I'm sure our audience is your must have learned from you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Raising us to your presence. Well, we joined us to this stage, and meant to find this content insightful. Please feel free to share to your friends or colleagues, your family members,